start.
How can Africa speed up its development? By speeding up its energy transformation. Despite Africa's great potential for clean energy, only a tiny fraction of the world's renewables is installed here. The African continent is growing faster than ever, and it simply can no longer afford more investments in the dirty and fragile economy of the past. Today, we're at a turning point. The recovery plans are the once-in-history push to radically change direction. We are here to make it happen. At RES4Africa, we stand for Africa. We believe in its huge potential. We believe in its innate energy. We believe in its growth. And we believe that all it needs is an enabling environment for its full development. At RES4Africa, we care for Africa. That's why we believe that clean energy is the only way to go. Because renewables mean more affordability. Because renewables mean more jobs. Because renewables mean more value. Because renewables mean more resilience, social justice, and health. At RES4Africa, we join for Africa. A unique blend of expertise along the whole value chain of renewables, joining forces to accelerate the transition towards a sustainable and inclusive future. At RES4Africa, we innovate for Africa. We constantly look for new, improved energy solutions to provide not just clean and powerful electricity, but also cutting-edge and reliable plants, electrical grids that guarantee quality and stability through digitalization and storage. At RES4Africa, we act for Africa. We promote dialogue between governments and private players to define conscious, long-term policies, encouraging adequate investments. We share know-how with all stakeholders to promote the full development of Africa together. We train locals on the field to share our expertise and make them owners of their energy. And we never, ever stop looking for new and win-win business models made of African DNA. With a long-term green recovery strategy, we can finally build back better in Africa, ensuring universal access to energy, making its economy more resilient, and leading the whole continent straight into a sustainable era. We are RES4Africa. Our mission is to build a better future through better energy. In Africa, with Africa, for Africa.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Hafiz Salmawi. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a professor of energy engineering at the Libyan University. I would like to thank RES4Africa for their kind invitation to moderate this important webinar on renewable energy in Libya, potential and challenges. I'll go straight to our opening remarks provided by Roberto Vigotti, Secretary General for RES4Africa Foundation. Roberto is, as mentioned, Secretary General of RES4Africa Foundation, which is an initiative promoted by 34 leading energy stakeholders for the deployment of renewable energy solutions and their integrations in the electricity market in the Mediterranean and Africa from 2012. He has a master's degree from the University of Pisa in electrical engineering. From 1974, he was at Enel, the Italian National Power Board, at the Research and Development Division in ultra-high voltage system. And from 1985, he had for a new renewable energy project until 2006. He also joined the International Energy Agency, where he was representing the Italian delegate to the Renewable Energy Working Party from 1989, deputy chair of Renewable Energy Working Party from 1989 until 2010, and chairman of the group, where he became a chairman of the group. He initiated and coordinated from 2012 the Renewable Energy Industry Advisory Board, which includes 34 world-leading companies and associations to support the strategy and program of work of IEA until 2019. He also is signatory and member of the Coalition for Action of IRENA, International Renewable Energy Agency. Roberto, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Afet. Thank you so much for this kind introduction, a long introduction. And let me go to the presentation. First of all, you see both logo, RES4Med and RES4Africa. We started, in fact, 2012 as RES4Med. At the time, Professor, you may remember, Desert Tech was the name of the game. So the only way to do renewable in Africa, in Northern Africa, was to import it in Europe. The same story now with hydrogen. Actually, it's not true anymore because the cost reduction, the efficiency, the performance of renewable required that we do renewable in Africa and for the Africans. Let me go quickly to a few slides of the introduction of who we are, and then Ilaria will complete my short presentation with MED. We have now a foundation growing and growing. We have 36 members. You see, are mostly European members, not anymore Italian at the beginning. We have a company like Siemens Gamesa, Renewable EDP, Portuguese, Schneider Electric from France, Nordex Action, and so on, Vestas, because we believe that the European can really support and share with the African people, including, of course, the Northern African people, the potential of stepping up and scaling up the deployment. You saw in our movie, you are the first one to see the movie, the institutional movie after my colleague. So this is a test. This is a new institutional movie we are launching for this 2021. Next slide shows also how we work. The mission of RES4Africa, RES4Med is to create an enabling environment for scaling up investment and to accelerate a just energy transition. We work in 4 streams: dialogue and partnership. Today we are here for this reason. More to come, I hope, with Libya. Strategic analysis, and you will see how Ilaria is preparing a bouquet of wonderful study on the Mediterranean. Capacity building, I know that our dear friend from GECOL was a member of our school in Milano for a training course, and we are very proud of having 500 people already attended our school. This year we did online, unfortunately, but we had 240 people online every Wednesday for 4 months. And finally, we do projects. Go ahead. Next slide shows quickly also. I recap here to show to our friend of GECOL, all these things are our strategic initiative for this year. And I hope we can, after this first meeting, include you in many of those. First of all, the missing link, we are investigating the openness, attractiveness, and readiness of the African country regulatory system. This is done with UNECA. Renew Africa is a new led initiative for encourage Europe to adopt a de-risking instrument to make sure that our company, particularly the private sector company, they don't need the millions for the EU. They can go with their billions if there is a guarantee of the investment. So it's very profound. The problem is not money. The problem is a regulatory and policy, and MEDREG is here for this reason. And the problem is to guarantee that the government comply with what they promise. Then we have, of course, a program on access to energy program, particularly on the water energy food nexus. We had a new launch of grids for Africa because we think that the grids are the backbone of any transition, and sometimes we forget about them. We talk only about renewable, we never talk about grids, but if you don't do renewable in grid, it's like if you buy a car, you don't have a road to go or a freeway. You need autostrada to go there. Finally, innovation digitalization, we are launching 5 webinars starting mid-April. I invite my Libyan colleague to join us and through Ilaria get access to these 5 webinars on digitalization. And finally, this year, the topic of the year is the job and socio-economic impact of clean energy. We are going to make a flagship report in June with Irina and with UNECA. Next slide. Very quickly I go because, of course, this is the reason for RES4Med, which is a vintage logo, but we want to make sure we promote in many countries that the transition can be done. And unfortunately, we see that 2% that afflicts Africa is also true in the Mediterranean. We have to do something more to accelerate it because except Morocco and Egypt, somehow the other countries are lagging behind. Next one. This is just to show you, these are some of the things done the last 5 years for those countries, not yet Libya, today is the first one, but the message I want to give you, we are very active also in analysis and study. Now, everything you see here, you can go in our website and without any password and without any registration, you can download all the presentations. So hopefully my friend Abu Salam, next year we have also Libya as an additional country. So from next slides on, after this brief introduction, I invite you to go to our website. I think Ilaria will bring you to a few slides on the broad program. Ilaria.
Thank you very much, Roberto. I'm Ilaria Urbani. I'm responsible of the Southern Mediterranean region in RES4Africa Foundation. Let me say that I'm very glad to be here today with you because this is the first event that the RES4Africa organized for Libya. So it's a pleasure for us to be involved in this kind of activity. I take also this occasion to thank GECOL for the jointly organization of this event. So I'm going to talk about the RES4Med program. We have added the Libya in our program starting from 2020, when we have launched a survey on the new renewable barrier to renewable energy investment. The survey will be published probably in a few months, and this is the start of our area of investigation in Libya. As you can see, in RES4Africa, we have some cross-cutting activity that involve all the North African region and the Middle East with Lebanon and Jordan, and some country-focused activity. Next slide, please. We have tried during this year to foster and to strengthen our cooperation with local partners, because we really believe that it's important to know the needs of the region and to organize activities, study, event, and promote public-private dialogue starting from the needs of the country. So next slide, please. For this year, as also Roberto mentioned, we have planned a lot of strategic study. In particular, some of study are country focus and focus on Morocco, because last year we signed an agreement with the Moroccan Ministry of Energy. But also our intention is to promote cross-country study. And for this year, we have a plan to do a study on the agrivoltaic and also to investigate on and looking at what happened in the last year in all the North African region. Also, Libya will be involved in the agrivoltaic. It will be also the one country involved in the agrivoltaic study and in the connected dot. Next slide, please. In this slide, I would like to show you the event that we have planned for the Mediterranean region. I would like to have, if you would like to have also more information regarding this event, please type me in the chat box and we will provide all the information after my presentation. Last but not least, next slide, we have created a platform, an online space to share any kind of content regarding the renewable in the region. And in this, we will also send you an invitation after the end of this webinar, because it's very important for us to be all participants of this kind of initiative, and also provide any kind of knowledge and share knowledge with all the other people that work in the region. It's time. I think that it's good to stop here and leave the floor to Afet. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ilaria, for your presentation. And if you allow me, I add that this month, 29th of March, RES4Africa, we're going to have a webinar jointly with a project in Egypt for guarantee of origin certificates for renewable energy and green hydrogen. And I invite all of you to join this webinar, because guarantee of origin is considered one of top priority for trading for renewable energy and consumption. If you allow me just to say a few words, I was lucky back in 2013 to attend the MEDELEC meeting in Tripoli, in Libya. There was an important presentation during this meeting on the national plan for developing the renewable energy in Libya. The presentation was presented by the Renewable Energy Authority of Libya. So we already have an institution was working in renewable energy or working in renewable energy in Libya, which means that the playground is ready for launching or relaunching a program for renewable energy. According to this presentation, the Renewable Energy Authority of Libya has mandates of conducting resource assessment, implement renewable energy project towards increasing the share of renewable energy in the country, energy mix, support industries related to renewable energy, propose legislations needed to support renewable energy, and implement energy efficiency programs. At that time, they showed that the main barriers for the development of renewable energy in Libya were needs for capacity building, needs for suitable policies and legal framework, ensure decent operation and maintenance of the developed plants, develop the necessary infrastructure, the grid, as Roberto mentioned, which can handle these intermittent renewable energy resources while maintaining system stability and reliability. Last but not least is to develop necessary financing scheme, which enable necessary finance for the project. I believe in Libya, as in many other parts in the world, these challenges are usually around. According to the plan presented during this time, the development scheme include a mix of state and private sector financed projects. Considering the recent development in Libya and the promising improvement and reduction of political risk, I believe this will open the road to resume and even update the previously targeted development of renewable energy plan. Yet, it is very important for the new renewable energy program is to develop an investment conducive environment for renewable energy in the country. This shows that renewable energy program is deeper than just being a technological or a bidding scheme. The program necessitates existence of a legal framework, announced target with reasonable time frame, and suitable institutional setup to make the process with clear governance. Furthermore, it needs guiding manuals regarding necessary procedures, complete set of all necessary documents and contracts. On the other hand, there should be a pre-qualification scheme which ensures that developers below standards cannot pollute the market. Currently, feed-in tariff has been over in many parts of the world as it doesn't ensure having competitive prices. Although bidding is considered a competitive mechanism, yet it is less competitive than auctioning mechanism. Auction can ensure much better prices compared with bidding. Furthermore, it is more flexible, where several auctions models already exist and applied successfully in many jurisdictions. It enables developers of different capacities to be involved in the process. This helps in increasing the market liquidity. Identification of a one-stop shop for developer to deal with is very important. With developer is very important to facilitate the developers in dealing with different stakeholders involved in the process. Well-developed contractual framework, bankable, contracts, which is up to the international best practice, or what is called bankable contracts, is very important. Although prices have dropped tremendously in many parts of the world, yet prices are country-specific, depending on many factors, including resource, regulatory framework, political economy status, macroeconomy, such as country credit rating, corruption and transparency rating, political risk, country track record regarding respecting its contractual obligation, and creditworthiness of the off-taker. All this, by the end, defines the expected prices. Things can be done the other way around, where a well-structured, credible, transparent process, we might not need to wait for all these indicators to be improved, but we could start with some pioneer project, I would say, but it should be well-structured, credible, transparent, based on transparent process. And this will be the best way to get a fair prices for the country. This process should be up to the best international practices in this field. Therefore, it's advisable to do the process on rounds, such that market price can be probed and credit in the process can be built. Yet, it's important to offer reasonable capacity per each round to ensure economy of scale. To this point, I'll stop here, and because when I look to our panelist list, it's covered all what I would like to hear, at least from myself as a person working with renewable energy for some time. We have panelists will speak about investment, about regulations, about finance, about technical dimensions, and we for sure going to have a presentation on status of electricity in Libya. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. I encourage all of you to seize this opportunity to forward questions to our panelists, where we will try to cover the maximum of these questions as much as the time will allow. You have a question tab at your screen. Please use this tab to forward the question and mention, if possible, to whom you would like to forward your question. Now, I will start with our first presentation, which will be about investment risk in Libya, listening to the voice of investors. This presentation will be presented by Jasmina Hodzek, Manager of Capital Project and Economics at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Jasmina Hodzek is a manager, as I mentioned, at PricewaterhouseCoopers for capital projects and economics, where she deals with renewable energy finance, policy, and external projection of European Green Deal. She has 5 years of experience assisting public and corporate clients in the broader energy sector. In the Mediterranean, she has been looking into renewable policy issues, IPP, access to markets, de-risking, and creating enabling environment. The floor is yours, Ms. Jasmine.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to ask Fabio to share the slides. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hafiz, for the introduction. Thank you, RES4Africa and RES4Med for organizing this webinar. I will tell you today about a survey which PwC did together with the RES4Africa Foundation. The survey is called Assessing Investment Risk in Renewable Energy. we talked about 7 countries in the Med region. Libya was one of them. Next slide, please. Okay, so I will tell you about the background about the methodology, and then I will go into the results of the survey. So basically, this survey is a follow-up to a similar work that we did in 2016, and back then we did 4 countries. So 5 years later, we extended the analysis to 3 more countries, and that includes Libya. The point of the survey was, we like this formulation that says listening to the voice of investors. What does that mean? Well, we started from the general statement that the Med region has immense unmet demand for energy. It also has an immense renewables potential, and yet there is not enough investments, neither private investments nor other types of investment in this renewables potential. And we ask, well, why is that? The common answer is that there is a series of risks that act like barriers to investment. We wanted to do this survey to ask investors what do they see are the risks to investing in the Med. And so the point was to bring the somehow subjective or views of those people who are meant to actually go in and make the investment decisions in these countries. Another motivation to do it this year was that we wanted to take stock of how things are evolving. So it's been 5 years since our last survey. A lot of things have changed. The Med is going through a lot of shifts, and both in terms of politics and also in terms of investment environment. So we wanted to see if these changes are being reflected in perceptions. We also wanted to identify what are the areas that we should prioritize in terms of action. So we did this survey. It's true that we call it listening to the voice of investors, but in reality, we also surveyed public sector stakeholders. So the idea is to look at both what the public sectors see and what the private see, and then to do a comparison. And so we cared a lot about having identifying the gaps in risk perceptions, with the idea that wherever there are gaps, these are the areas where more work is needed, work in terms of policy work or greater dialogue. And then the last reason why we wanted to do this survey, and this is going to be some blatant bragging for the RES4Africa Foundation and us at PwC, we've done a lot of work on de-risking in the last years. So Roberto mentioned earlier the Renew Africa initiative. There has also been a flagship publication on de-risking. And so let's say that we have a lot of new competences and a better understanding of what are the ways to de-risk the renewables investment. And so this survey was also meant to reflect on what we have learned and then try to make a study that will reflect on that. The survey is not yet published. It should be in a couple of weeks. So you will all receive a link, and we will be happy to share it with you. Next slide, please. Good. Now moving into the actual survey. So what is inside it? We've had 142 persons who participated, and maybe some of you are also in this webinar today, so we really thank you a lot for dedicating your time. Out of those 142, there has been 33 who gave their view on Libya. So there's been 7 countries, and then people could choose which country they wanted to rate. Out of those 33 stakeholders for Libya, 15 of them were from the public and 18 from the private sector. So there is quite an even split of views. And then within the private sector, so this box on the very right, if you look at the percentages, they don't add up fully because I'm not including the public sector. So this split is only within the private sector to answer, well, what's inside it? Well, we have a split between professional services. By services, we mean a mix of consultancies, engineering firms, lawyers, industry associations. And then we have a share of industry, and then also finance. So you see, we try to get a diversity of views in this survey. So even though they are subjective views, they represent a kind of a valid mix of views that should cover the entire investment segment. Next slide, please. All right, here a little bit more detail about the methodology of the survey. So what did we actually ask? we identified 26 risks, which we grouped in 5 areas. And you see here in the slide, you see these areas. I'm not going to go through all of the risks. There's quite a few of them, 26. But generally, the areas that you see are meant to cover the entire project cycle. So starting from legal and regulatory framework, so this includes things like political risk, risk related to the legal framework, to market access, general risk related to the business environment and conditions for investing. Then we have the risk of revenues that an investor would get from an asset. So here the risks that are relevant are, for example, counterparty risk, sovereign risk, termination, curtailment, and so on. Then we have construction and operation risk. This is a self-explanatory term. And then we have financial structuring. So this is things like interest rate or inflation or simply financing availability. That's a big one. And finally, environmental and social issues. So this is about social acceptance. It's about force majeure, environmental impact procedures, and so on. So long story short, we had all of these 26 risks where we asked participants to rate them on a scale from 1 to 4, where 1 means very low risk and 4 means very high. Quite a simple survey. It takes about 10 minutes to fill it in. And in the next slides, I'm going to tell you what were the results. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, next slide. Thank you, Fabio. Yes, so here we come to the results for Libya. First slide is the big picture. So on this chart, what you see is the overall level of risk for all the 7 countries that we analyzed. So you see that Morocco is at the top. Morocco has a very low, well, rather low risk level, and there's been a particular improvement in Morocco's risk environment in the last 5 years. Then there is a group of medium risk countries where you see vaguely we can group Egypt, Jordan, and Tunisia together, where by medium risk we mean that some things are going very well, and then there are other areas where more work is needed. And then there is a bottom group of countries that have a high risk, and that is Algeria, Libya, and Lebanon. So you see that Libya has a rather high risk level, and that is not surprising. There is understandable reasons. Libya is obviously going through or maybe coming out of a decade of conflict, and that obviously has its implications on investment environment. So rather what is surprising is that Libya is not too far distant from its neighboring countries. So actually investors are quite optimistic. If you compare it to Algeria and Lebanon, you see that Libya is not too far. Next slide, please. Good. Here, going into a little bit more detail. So what are those risks that are of interest to us? In this visual, you see the top 5 risks that have been identified by investors. The number that you see in each box is the share of participants who said that that specific risk is high or very high, right? So you see that at the top of the list, you have political force majeure, political risk, security and safety. So that is not surprising, and it comes from the structural issues that Libya is facing, and it's related to the conflict and to all its implications. So it's related to also simply the safety of assets and safety of people in the field. And so there is understandable drivers of that perception of political risk. And then another group is inflation, and here I could add other financial risks such as interest rate or availability of finance or tax rate. So all of these again are related to the broader macroeconomic picture. So you know that Libya is the Libyan dinar basically has lost a lot of its value. The country is all the economic transactions are largely dollarized. And so investors simply don't have the safety that inflation will not damage their investments. And then the last element, which certainly is not of least importance, is IPP market access. where you see that 76% of participants said that it's a high or very high risk. And again, that is not surprising. Libya is formally remains closed for IPP market participation. There have been mild movements to open up the market, but if you look at the laws that are now in place, there is not a possibility for an IPP to enter into the market. So obviously that is also a source of risk. Next slide, please. Okay, here we have a chart that is that looks a little bit busy. I'm going to guide you through it. The point of this chart is to show you the top 10 risks as perceived by the public and the private. So the point is to show what are the gaps in perception between public and private stakeholders. So you saw at the beginning that there was about the same number, 18 and 15 for one and the other. Libya has two interesting points, to my mind, compared to other countries. The first one is the level of risk perception of one group and the other. So you see that the bar on the left of the public is a little bit taller than on the right. And what that means is that the public is actually seeing more risks than the private. And that is very surprising because in every other country, the private sector is more pessimistic than the public. So Libya is a big exception to the region. And it could tell us two things. There could be two reasons. One of them, it could be that the public sector in Libya is very pessimistic. So our friends maybe who are in the audience would identify with that. No, jokes aside, to my mind, the greater message is that the private sector is very optimistic about Libya. So there is a lot of exuberance, or at least as seen as in our survey, there is exuberance on the part of the private sector to invest in Libya. So it's not clear whether that is driven by the recent improvements that we are seeing. So there is hopes that things are starting to get better, or it's simply a topic to be explored. So how come is it that the private sector is so optimistic about Libya? And then one particular point that is striking is, I marked it on red, the risk related to IPP market access. So I said earlier that the market is formally closed to IPP participation. And in fact, the public sector puts it as the third most important risk, or the most important barrier rather, like that is a barrier to investment. The private sector puts it only at the 6th place of most important risks or most important barriers. So that is also interesting. How come is it that the private sector, I mean, I guess there is other avenues that they are seeing for investment. So I will leave that with you. I have one more slide about recommendation. Next slide, please. Good. So maybe just to conclude, and what is the way forward on the basis of this survey and what we found. Well, generally what we said is that for every risk or every barrier that we identified, we tried to give some recommendations on how to mitigate them. And for the group of political risk, safety and security, all the risks, or inflation, all the risks that are related to that macro systemic view of Libya and the problems that it has, mitigating these risks is obviously contingent upon the stabilization of the conflict situation. So there isn't much in terms of de-risking that one can do without resolving these fundamental questions. Or there is, but ultimately it's not going to be very effective. So to build safety and security, simply those conditions have to be met. But then there is another group of risks that we wanted to, another group of barriers, and that is related to IPP market access and the general area of regulatory barriers. And here our recommendations are a little bit more, maybe more implementable. And we recommend to start by trying to create a consensus around market opening to IPPs. And to our mind, consensus is very important because it is something where all stakeholders need to be involved. It's an important dialogue between the incumbent companies, between all the various public and private stakeholders in the country. So only once that consensus is created, then the country can proceed to the second bullet point here, which is creating a legal and regulatory framework to enable a market opening. So putting in place all the laws and regulations that would permit that. And here it is key not only to draw the laws, but also to implement them. And Libya can certainly draw on a lot of regional experiences. There is plenty of ways to get transferable lessons. RES4Africa does great work in terms of policy assistance. So the resources are there once that consensus is established in the country. And finally, very last recommendation is to explore the possibility to pursue an IPP pilot project. So with the idea that once all the regulation is in place, it would be of great use to have one demonstration project to identify maybe in practice what are the potential barriers and to chart the path that then other IPPs could pursue and model it after that first pilot project. And with that, I'm done with my part. I understand that there is a Q&A session at the very end, so I look forward to taking some of your questions if you have any. Back to you, Hafiz.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hodzek, for very interesting presentation and the roadmap you showed by the end for how we could move from the point and forward. Actually, this is remind me with a survey on investment in Mediterranean, which was carried back by MEDREG in 2015, and also showed that regulatory risk, maybe Libya represent a special case now, specifically nowadays regarding political risk, but in general, regulatory risk is very high usually, and fragmentation of regulatory infrastructure is one of the main challenges. But your advice is quite valid regarding moving in parallel, having pilot as well as working with improving the framework regulatory investment on other activities for this project. I encourage all of you to forward your questions for this very interesting presentation, which is basically represent a kind of very much needed dialogue to be there with investors and all stakeholders. I might switch to the second presentation on trends of the Libyan power industry with focus on renewable energy. The presentation will be presented by Dr. Abdsalam Al-Ansari. Dr. Abdsalam Al-Ansari has been working for GECOL, which is a vertical integrated service provider in Libya. He worked in GECOL since 1998, and he has been promoted to a higher position in GECOL since, and recently Dr. Ansari was appointed as a deputy chairman on the new appointed board of directors. Dr. Ansari has a BSc degree in power system engineering. He also has an MSc in renewable energy and distributed generation from Herod University in UK, as well as a PhD degree in electrical engineering from Strathclyde University in Scotland. His area of expertise are transmission system operation and planning, generation, renewable energy, high voltage DC, energy storage system, and smart grid. Dr. Ansari has authored and co-authored several technical reports, journals, and conference papers in the area of the power system and grid integration of renewable energy. Dr. Ansari is a member in the Mediterranean Power System Operator, MEDTSO, and also a member and reviewer of IEEE IAS Plus and Power Electronic Transactions. Dr. Ansari, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone. First of all, I would like to thank RES4Africa and all the teams for joining, for arranging this meeting, and also would like to thank Dr. Hafiz also for his introduction. Today, I'm going to speak about the trend of Libyan power industry with a focus on renewable energy. Yeah, next slide, please. Power industry in Libya is monopolized by GECOL, General Electricity Company of Libya, which is a state-owned company and monopolize the generation, transmission, as well as distribution. As you can see, GECOL is vertical integrated utility and was established in 1984 under Decree number 17 from Parliament. Next slide, please. If we would like to talk about the generation assets of GECOL, you can see that the generation asset in GECOL is located at the coastal line of the country, with almost 15 power plants, with a total of 85 generating units, with a variation of size, technology, and also the fuel usage. 50% of these generating units are combined cycle, and the other is distributed between gas turbines and steam turbines, and also small generating units, which are used in emergency cases. Next slide, please. The transmission network in GECOL, you can see that Libya is almost 100% electrified, and it can be considered as a robust transmission system in Africa. And the transmission covers almost all the countries. It consists of 400 kV transmission, 220 kV, also 400 substation and power plants, and so on. Next, please. If we'd like to talk now about the GECOLs, I would like to give you an idea about GECOL for workforce. GECOL workforce give an idea about the GECOL workforce with a number of 40,000 employees. You can see that 5,000 are work in the generation department, and they are also 5,000 works at the transmission level, and all the other remaining are divided in different departments of the distribution department and customer care. Next, please. Now I would like to move to the renewable energy potential and challenges, to give an idea about what are the potentials and what are the risks and what are the things has to be done in order to promote for the renewable energy in Libya. Next, please. So the main question is why Libya should invest in renewable energy immediately. This is a good question, and we should think on this question. At least 4 important arguments for renewable to be considered in the future energy of Libya are available. This argument is, the first one is energy security, renewable energy potentials in the country, also economic perspectives, and also there is some long-term perspectives, and I am going to take them one by one briefly. Next slide, please. Next. Okay, these curves, the first one is the first perspective is security of power supply, and why we should think of the renewable energy, because you can see that the upper curve represents this curve is based on 10-year load forecasts for the generation and load balance up to 2030. These kind of analysis allow us to estimate the needed or the capacity that would needed during this period. You can see that the upper curve shows the total required capacity, including the security margin that we should take. Even with this curve, now we are in 21. You can see that we will, even for this summer, even with the new projects that are undergoing, will have as a generation shortage in the coming years, and this gap is dramatically will be increased unless we have a conventional or a renewable energy capacities in place. Next, please. So, as I've mentioned, for the security of power supply perspective, the conventional power project, either contractor or under development, cannot cover the demand even in the near future. The second thing is, as the most conventional power plants are located along the coastal, as you've seen in the map, in the coastal, remote location and central location needs electricity, and these electricity can be supplied and provided easily by sort of renewable energy as a measure to increase energy security. Also, decentralization and scalability are strength of renewable energy, in particular PV and wind, as the resources are available on site and they can increase or enhance, as I've mentioned, system stability. Next, please. The other perspective is why we should think of immediate action in renewable energy investment is the renewable energy potential of Libya. You can, the Libya has a high potential of solar as well as wind. The long-term annual global horizontal irradiation is between 1,900 kilowatt per hour per meter up to 2,500 kilowatt hour per meter. You can see it has a considerable potential of solar. This potential is suitable for investment for both PV, photovoltaic, and also concentrated solar power, CSP. Regarding the wind, the average wind speed in Libya is at range from 5 to 10 meters, which is attractive even for the investing in wind energy. Next, please. These figures gives you an example of the atlas of solar atlas in Libya, and you can see that from this maps, the DNI it ranges from almost 2,000 up to 3,000 kilowatt hour per square meter per year, which equivalent almost 7 kilowatts hour per meter per day. Next, please. This is the wind atlas from this atlas you can see that Libya, as I've mentioned, has got an average wind speed from 5 to 10 meters per second. Next, please. Now, the third perspective is the economic perspective. the economic, you know, the economic is a driving force that can justify this kind of project and renewable energy investment in Libya. The first, from this point, the first point is the efficiency of the old conventional power plant is low, so it is not economically to keep running this kind of technology. Also, a net monetary gain by adding renewable to the grid would be attractive as the conventional plan with the fuel on the true costs basis have a highly marginal cost. This means that we can add money, add revenue to the country by selling the fuel consumption, the fuel usage for the generating unit. Therefore, it's important to build up a competency to enable the sector to carry out renewable energy projects on scale in the coming year. It's very important. This message is very important. Renewable energy is considered, as I've mentioned, as a fuel saver, and we can export the fuel and bring money back to the country instead of burning this fuel. Yeah, next please. The long-term perspective. Given the abundance of renewable energy resources, a considerable share of renewable and power plant fleets would strengthen both the economic and political stability of the country, especially with the presence of the efficient electricity pricing scheme. As I've mentioned, this electricity pricing scheme and legal framework to regulate the renewable energy is a crucial point. Okay, the second long-term perspective is private sector engagement in renewable energy for technologies spillover and administrative as well as procedure knowledge. All these three aspects will positively reflect on the economic and social activities. Also, the renewable sector provide a further benefits in terms of health, environmental protection, and sustainability, and as a third long-term perspective. Next, please. Now I'm going to talk about the least cost expansion plan study that was carried out in 2018 jointly with the World Bank and Renewable Energy Authority of Libya. The summary of this study shows that with a positive regulatory framework condition, the upscaling dynamic of renewable in Libya grid will be high. This is a good feedback from this study. The second one is from the side of technology deployment, competitive pricing, and financing. Also, the deployment process will significantly accelerate within a few years. All this perspective are expected to be accelerated and take place hopefully in a few years after the political conflicts remove. And on the other hand, the main constraint could appear in non-viable businesses case where tariff or permitting allowance under unclear or being withheld on in comparison in agreed access or PPE negotiation would be unreasonable, not provided. Yeah, next, please. You can see from this figure, this is the summary of the least cost expansion plan for the energy mix. You can see the result shows that for the PV, for the photovoltaic and wind, can be the photovoltaic and wind can be integrated to the network from network perspective without any risk of blackouts, while at the same time reducing costs, i.e., it can have a good economic relations. On the other hand, the PV, on the other hand, for the solar, for the concentrated solar power, only becomes attractive if a favorable financing condition continue the capex to decrease. This means for the time being the capex of the CSP is still high, so it would be attractive if this capex decreases, or also the CSP can have rule even in the future if there is a limit wind sites or PV site for these technologies. Next, please. Now, what are the opportunities of renewable energy? You can see that advance of renewable energy resources, we have an opportunities of. Also, we have a well-educated workforce, in particular in engineering. This would help and speed up all the studies and the know-how transfer for these engineers. Also, first initiative scheme and institutional structure for renewable reform process is in place. In fact, one of the outcome of the World Bank study is to come up with a new entity, a regulatory entity called REDEVCO, in order to take care for the development and investment of the energy of renewable energy. Also, we have another opportunity being in interconnection with other neighboring country, which allows energy exchange between these neighboring countries. On the other hand, the challenges for renewable energy, as we've briefly discussed, absence of renewable energy rules and legislations, also lack of appropriate renewable energy scheme. Generally, wind and solar map. We have a map of general wind and solar, but they depends on the satellite, and we would need a more measuring station to have a full picture of wind and solar in the country. Also, no sufficient dedicated state renewable energy fund. Unfortunately, we don't have any fund for renewable energy promoting in the country. Also, no feed-in tariff scheme, no public competitive bidding for the private renewable energy development, no action schemes. Also, instability of the country, and hopefully for this point, hopefully with the new government, these challenges will be removed. Next, please. So, power industry sector in Libya should take steps to move from, you can see, we can move by a good strategic plan and good legal framework, the legal framework and regulation, electricity regulation and the renewable energy regulation. We can move from electricity supply only by monopolies utility. We can have an IPP regime that independent power producer can be allowed there. Also, we can move from central government trends to a development possibility, site selection, and permit grid access. In terms of off-taker, unclear off-taker, we should move from unclear off-taker possibility to favorable off-take regime. And also we should consider the exit of the agreements, and we can now we don't have no transfer of special private sector or permit possible. We should have the possibility to exit the investments at any certain time of the process. Next, please. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ansari, for very interesting presentation. I believe the point which has been raised by Dr. Ansari is very much consistent with our first presentation, where it showed that the importance of the regulatory, showed a regulatory framework. Dr. Ansari confirmed on the 4 pillars of the energy strategy in or renewable energy drivers for Libya regarding energy security, renewable energy potentials, economic perspectives, long-term perspectives. Also, he showed us that by 2030, I just get it from the graph, around 4,500 megawatt of renewable energy could be installed, which could represent between, I try to match it with the expansion plan, that might represent between 20 to 25% of the installed capacity. I don't know how much from the energy, which is a criteria, but it might be between 10 and 15% of energy mix or electricity mix would come from renewable. As Dr. Ansari pointed out, that going in parallel, which was also confirmed by Mrs. Hodzek, about going in parallel roads, having an IPP pilot project parallel for completing the regulatory framework, and fortunately that our political risk is becoming lower and diminishing soon, inshallah, as things is moving forward. Also, I encourage you very much to ask your question also to Dr. Absalam, specifically what he presented about the future plan for renewable energy mix, as he showed that PV will play the major role of supply in the energy. Also, I believe also most oil producing countries nowadays are also focusing on green hydrogen and how this will affect the need for more renewable energy. Specifically, Libya has a very good relative advantage as the longest country on the onshore, the southern onshore of the Mediterranean, and the European market for green hydrogen might be one of the very promising markets. Okay, I now move to my favorite topics for sure as an ex-regulator for Egypt, and go for a presentation on the role of regulator and regulatory framework in promoting investment in Libya. The presentation will be presented by Mr. Hassan Ozok. Mr. Ozok is Mediterranean energy regulator, General Secretary, Deputy General Secretary since March 2018. He is in charge of developing activities, tools, regulatory standards, and good practices to promote an efficient and compatible regulatory framework in the Mediterranean region. He also coordinates and contributes to the national and regional energy progress reports, supports MEDREG institutional relation, and guides training programs on legislative and regulatory development. Prior for being in MEDREG, Mr. Uzak occupied the position of sector manager of energy and as a delegation of the European Union to Turkey, managing reform process, implementation, and follow-up of pre-accession development, monitoring and coordinating programs, projects under the EU financial assistance to Turkey between 2010 and 2018. He was a senior gas expert, head of hydrocarbon for the Energy Community Secretariat in Vienna. Also, he started his career in the Petroleum Pipeline Corporation, BOTAS, in 1994 as a natural gas engineer. Also, he participated in the startup of the Energy Market Regulatory Authority, EMRA, in Turkey, which has been established 2001, as he joined from the beginning in the preparation and implementation of the implementing legislation of natural gas market laws. Mr. Rojak has a degree in metallurgical and material science engineering, as well as a master degree from the Middle East Technical University. Mr. Rojak, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Dr. Hafez. I would like to also greet all the audience. First and foremost, my thanks to RES4Africa for inviting us to such a webinar for one of our members that we have lost connections since some years. And seizing this opportunity, I hope we will reconnect with our members, Libya, once again. From the very beginning, we have seen the risk, the political risks and the technical risks, which has been currently presented by Yasmina, and also by Abdus Salem El Ansari from the Libya has shared with us the opportunities and challenges in Libya, even underlying the need for establishing a regulators and a regulatory framework. Before going into the details, I would like to just start with a few anecdotes from my own 30 years of almost experience. So in 2003, I participated in a very big international conference held in Germany, where I am now. Almost 1,500 participants joined to this international organization in energy sectors. I remember that time, almost 18 years ago, the World Bank president that time joined through a kind of video conference to the conference. He said that very shortly, precisely, in a very nutshell, don't try for the renewable energy sources. Even if you consume all the renewable energy sources in the world, it will not make almost 10% of today's total consumption. So no need. Renewable energy is a romantic story. So I am repeating this every time. Why? Because it's extremely important. Today, from 18 years ago, when we come today, we clearly see that the renewable energy is not a romantic story at all. It's a real story, and it is happening. And hopefully, it will somehow contribute into our life in a very, very positive way towards the decarbonization of our energy markets. I will today touch upon on the role of regulators and the regulatory framework in promoting the investments through a kind of real experiences that I have been involved. Before going to this one, let me mention about MEDREC. Next slide, please. Okay, MEDREC, it's an association of 27 members from 22 countries, as I said in the beginning, including Libya. Libya is one of our founder members, but unfortunately, due to the conflicts since some years, we have lost our communication with our Libyan colleagues, and seizing this opportunity, we will reconnect with Libya, hopefully. And 9 regulators from the European Union countries, 3 Balkan countries, and including Turkey, and 9 Middle East and North African countries. The main objective, or the main aim of MEDREC is to promote a harmonized, compatible, non-discriminatory regulatory framework with a view to establishing a secure, sustainable, and competitive Mediterranean energy markets. In order to reach these targets, so we are developing exchange programs. We are developing study visits. We are somehow promoting regulatory cultures through different types of, let's say, different types of models, through workshops, trainings, study visits for our members. And also MEDREC itself acts as a kind of platform for discussions among our members to exchange their experience, practices, in order to find the best way to implement in their energy markets. Next slide, please. We have 5 pillars as a strategy. As I said, that first and foremost, we would like to see all our members have established their independent regulators and with a kind of regulatory framework. In this respect, I believe that we made good progress. So far, except 2 countries, I would say 3, including Libya, have not established a regulator and regulatory framework for the time being. The rest have already established their regulators, independent regulators, and regulatory framework in their, let's say, in their respected countries and energy markets. Lebanon and Tunisia, we are in contact. They are active members of MEDREC, and we have already received a very positive, let's say, the statements from their side that both countries are on the way to establish their independent regulators, hopefully within this year. And here I call on Libya once more. I hope we will be in contact again. MEDREC will be ready to support, to give all our contribution, whatever it is needed in order to establish their independent regulators and regulatory framework, as it has already been stated and underlined by Dr. Abdussalam El Ansari, which is a need in opening or in promoting the investment in Libya. The second pillars to create a kind of optimal conditions for particularly the private sectors in order to come and to invest in renewable energy sources. Of course, the third pillar is to see that we have a functioning Mediterranean energy markets, and in electricity and gas, all members are exchanging the energy among their respective countries. We would like to also intensify the regional cooperation among our members, and we would like to really protect through different mechanisms to our, let's say, the consumers and users, particularly vulnerable consumers, and to create some pilot projects in the region as a kind of model projects for the rest of the countries. Next slide, please. So challenges, it has been already mentioned by Yasmina and Dr. Abdussalam. I would not go into the details of the physical challenges, structural institutional challenges. I will rather focus on the regulatory challenges, being association of the energy regulators. So basically, I will touch upon in a later stage what are the regulatory challenges. For the time being, we can divide into the 4 different, let's say, the sections. Lack of a harmonized legislation and market rules, lack of an independent regulators in some countries, lack of competition, I would say, in the markets, and lack of published and clear and transparent information for all members. But it doesn't mean that these 4 challenges are already there. No, these 4 challenges have been somehow overcome by many countries, and they are on the way to really create a fully functioning energy market. At the same time, these challenges are still remaining in some part of the countries. So we are currently really supporting and contributing to our members in order to overcome with these challenges too. Next slide, please. These slides I have taken from the International Energy Agency, which has already been presented in the beginning of this webinar by RES4Africa. The current amount of, let's say, the potential of renewable energy in Africa has been used only by 2%. Comparing to the other countries, it's almost nothing. We would say that in Africa, the process or the investments or the legal framework has just started. I hope in the coming days, in the coming months and years, Africa also would be able to consume its own potential comparing to the other part of the continent. Next slide, please. And obviously, this is another slide from the International Energy Agency. By next 20 years, I have already mentioned the last 20 years and today where we are, and even for the next 20 years where we are going to, and what we are going to really achieve in the next 20 years. You clearly see that there are different scenarios. One of them is steps, the state policies scenarios, and the other one is the SDC, which is the sustainable development scenarios. These different type of scenarios are developed by the International Energy Agency for the future projections, demand and supply projections. As you clearly see that in the sustainable development scenarios towards the decarbonization of the energy markets, we see the total share of solar energy in the total share of consumption and the total share of energy energy generation or energy production. Next slide, please. I am not going into details of these details because you already know the potential of the renewable energy in the regions. These are some trends that I have received. I have taken from one of our, let's say, the recent reports. Basically, we say that in the southern or the North African countries or our members, the population is expected to grow in the next 20 years almost double. So additional 85 million inhabitants. So we are expecting a kind of stagnant energy demand in the northern, in the European parts, but at the same time an energy intensive development in the southern and East Mediterranean countries. So in that respect, South and East Mediterranean electricity demand, for sure, it will be more than double by 2014. It means that an extra capacity of 100, almost 200 gigawatts is needed. And majority of it is expecting to come from the renewable energy sources. So the total amount of the investment is around $400 billion. Next slide, please. So just a kind of example, for the last, let's say, the 20 years, 25 years from the region. As you can see that in 1996, these are the demand in the southern, let's say, the members, including Turkey. And after 20 years, between 1996 and 2016, you see the electricity demand increase is almost triples in Turkey, Egypt, and Algeria. Next slide, please. So these are the barriers and challenges. Of course, these are the common challenges and barriers for the investment in the Mediterranean region. Let's repeat one more. I mean, the government influence on electricity exchange in some countries, not in all countries. Absence of a secure and stable regulatory framework, which has already been said. Significant subsidization and cross-subsidization on tariffs and prices. Lack of information, different socio-economies, absence of a transparent and non-discriminatory access to the networks, and the long-term regulatory framework. These are the main challenges or barriers in creating a functioning energy market in the Mediterranean region. Next slide, please. I mean, what would bring us? What are the benefits, or if we really create a kind of functioning Mediterranean energy market? So we need first and foremost to develop, as already mentioned, a public-private dialogue in order to promote investment in the region. So this is key in increasing the renewable energy sources. And established, which we have repeated several times, a stable regulatory framework, particularly in the MENA region, which will play a critical role in paving way for the investment. And also integration of the renewable energy sources into the system. And of course, the system stability and flexibility is also another big challenges. And these will definitely create new job opportunities and for the growing population, and it will also boost the economy in the coming years to come. Next slide, please. So these are the electricity cross-border interconnections. We have already said the benefits if the countries located in the vicinity of the Mediterranean Sea interconnected with each other, not only for the electricity but also for the gas. So it will bring ample opportunities for each country. So if we just list some of them, it can improve improving the allocation of the investment risk and cost for obviously reducing the electricity prices, increasing the energy efficiency, increasing the integration of renewable energy sources in the system, and fostering the security of supply for all members. Next slide, please. Regulatory reforms. Do we really need to regulate the markets? I would say yes, because it has been almost, let's say, more than 20 years. These regulatory regulations started particularly in the European part of the continent. And before the European Union, it started in the United States of America. And with their experience and following the developments in the European Union as a kind of role model for the neighbor countries, for the regions, I remember when the first electricity directive and the first natural gas directive adopted in the late 90s in the European Union on a community basis. So since then, I have been closely following the developments in the European Union and also the neighborhood countries like Balkans and Southern African countries, Northern African countries in the Mediterranean regions. The progress that the European Union made is significant. Can you imagine that today, with the help of regulation, with the help of regulatory framework and independent regulation, with a clear, transparent tariff mechanisms, and with the long-term predictability, today, all the European Union, let's say the consumers, customers, have right to choose their supplier freely, immediately, with a kind of very competitive prices and with a kind of very good quality of services. So therefore, we have to regulate the energy markets in order to create a functioning, competitive, secure, and sustainable energy markets. My experience showed me that being one of the pioneers in the Turkish energy market and also in the Balkans energy market, with the establishment of the regulators, establishing of a regulatory framework, you cannot imagine how you could promote the investments and create a very positive atmosphere for the foreign investors. And being an employee of the European Commission before joining the MEDREC last, let's say, 9 years, I have seen clearly
Hassan,
a very clear indication.
If we can conclude to keep track with the program.
Yes. Yeah, I am coming, Dr. Hafez. So basically, I was receiving every week 2 or 3 investors from the European Union. They wanted to invest in the Turkish energy markets. Basically, they were asking 2 questions: whether the independent regulator is established and the tariffs are identified, the cost-based tariffs are identified by the regulators. These 2 questions. When they asked these 2 questions, they were deciding on whether to come to invest or not. So next slide, please. I have already mentioned this one. If we established a regulator and regulatory framework, it will facilitate, it will improve the climate for the investors. Next slide, please. Okay. Also considering the time limitation, conclusion and recommendations. A coordinated policy and regulatory framework is essential in order to promote, incentivize the investment in the renewable energy sector, particularly in Libya. This is a kind of must and a need. Regulation can facilitate and promote investments and remove the obstacles in the markets, the technical and non-technical, let's say, the obstacles. It can ensure accelerated permit granting, allow longer regulatory periods, assure appropriate investments and incentives. Regulator can issue decision on allocation of costs and their inclusion in the regulated network tariffs and cross-border projects as well, which can help the investors to see the predictability for the future projects. And regulators can ensure appropriate investment incentives, which could be brought by the regulators in order to promote and accelerate the investment, not only in the Libya, in the region. So saying this one as a last words, as I said, that establishing a regulators with a supported regulatory framework can pave the way for investors, particularly for the international investors, to come to country to invest. And for the domestic ones as well, it will accelerate the investments and it will really create a kind of very positive environment for all investors who would like to enter into the market. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hassan, for very valuable presentation. You highlighted the importance of public-private dialogue, which is consistent with our first presentation. Integration of renewable energy challenges for integration of renewable energy with the system, which is very much important, and the electricity cross-border interconnection, which could help in boosting renewable energy. Also, you're encouraging Libya to resume its effective role in the MEDREC. It's very much important because this will help in getting experience exchange, which could help Libya in developing its new regulatory form. Although I remember we received a delegate from Libyan Ministry of Electricity back maybe 15 years ago, and there was a plan already for establishing a regulatory agency, and I think with this new era they should look forward to update these plans. I go straight forward to our next presentation, where now we switch maybe from regulatory to finance. So principle of bankability for a renewable energy project in North Africa. The presentation will be provided by Alessandro Stefanoni. Mr. Stefanoni is a senior corporate banker in the energy team at Intesa São Paulo Corporate and Investment Banking Division. Alessandro has worked extensively for almost 20 years on various energy and infrastructure deals in a wide array of sectors, including water, public infrastructure, power, and renewable energy. He was the head of the project finance at Banca Popolare Emilia Romagna. I hope I pronounced it right, but please help me.
No problem.
Interbanca GE Capital, and was formerly associated with Banca Intesa. He is one of the co-authors of the 3 editions of Project Finance in Theory and Practice, Elsevier, and faculty member at Bocconi University Management School. He already graduated from the same university. Please, the floor is yours, Mr. Stefan.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, as we believe that we are member of the RES4Africa Foundation as Intesa Sanpaolo. So we think that RES4Africa and RES4Me represent the right way to develop renewable energy in Africa. So we do believe that all these events organized by RES4Africa for us represent a way, first of all, to learn something, as also for me, this is the first time I had the opportunity to understand, to speak about renewable energy in Libya, and the second, also to try to give our contribution to all the panelists, take into account what our experience as a commercial bank, even is based in Italy, but with a very important international footprint. Now I want to spend 2 minutes about Intesa Sanpaolo and the activity that we do as Intesa Sanpaolo. Even I don't want to promote anything, first of all, but just to create understand which kind of bank Intesa Sanpaolo is. So please, next slide. Thank you. Okay, and Intesa Sanpaolo is a private commercial bank. So means that the capital of the banks are owned by private foundation, infra funds, private equity funds. So it's not a public bank in the sense that the capital is not owned by public entities or sovereign funds. So means that also our mission sometimes is quite different from the mission that should have some international or state-owned company bank like DFI, like FC, World Bank, EIB. So the mission is quite different. Even we collaborate a lot with this institution, in particular in emerging country, where it is fundamental to have the commitment to be part of this transaction also with this kind of institution. Well, next, please. Okay, this is some highlight about the banks. So consider that Intesa Sanpaolo is the 4th bank in terms of market capitalization in Europe. The banks is based in the headquarters is in Milan and in Turin. So we have 2 different headquarters, legal headquarters and the CBI headquarters. And the banks is divided into different divisions. CIB, which is Corporate Investment Banking Division, when I work as all the big client, the corporation, the IPP, and all the other big corporation, and the Banca Territorio with for much more the retail business. The last slide about Intesa Sanpaolo, which is very important before starting to speak about this matter on the Libya. Please, next slide. Thank you. Okay, is this international presence of Intesa Sanpaolo? This international presence is important because we invest in renewable energy globally, not only in Italy, not only in European market, even the European market and the Italy represent our core market for a question of proximity of our banks. But in the last 10 years, the banks decide also to increase a lot our international activity abroad, and so we have we have some hubs which are based in New York, Dubai, Hong Kong, Milan, and London, where follow also all our international client outside Italy and also outside Europe. In particular, I want to focus our analysis of how does we cover the North African countries and the Middle East and North African countries. We cover that through our hub of Dubai. Even we have also a strong presence in North Africa, as Intesa Sanpaolo own Alex Bank, which is one of the biggest Egyptian banks, commercial banks. So a part of the international activity that we can have in energy, we also have the possibility in this country to have also a local approach and a local activity to our clients which are based in the area. So this is what I want to say, that we are a commercial bank, so we have a risk approach which is quite different from the DFI, IFC, World Bank. Even all of us are banks at the same time. And the second is that we invest in renewable worldwide. So we finance wind farm or PV plant from Australia to LATAM, to Middle East, to Asia, to Europe. So it's quite interesting to look how does the market work when you change geography and when you move from emerging market to very mature market, like for example the North US market or the European market, which is very close to the market of North Africa and particularly also of the Libya. As also you know that the connection between Libya and Italy are very strong, in particular for there are some major company in Italy that invest a lot of money there in Libya. So there is a lot of connection of that. So when I was invited by RES4Africa on this event, I was very pleased. I tried to understand what should be my contribution on that, because first of all I need to understand much more better how does it work, the legislation, which are the electricity situation of Libya, before taking the lesson to say what you have to do. So I want to spend please next slide, thank you. I've just finished to speak about Intesa Sanpaolo, but I suggest that is important for us, because since I want to make you understand which are our approach in terms of private bank. Is it clear that all of us, all the previous speech has deeply investigate which are the risks affecting the investment in emerging market, and even each market is different from the other. Is it clear that the risks are always the same? So you are a risk connected to legal framework, as is clear that if it means a legal framework is not so easy to understand how to invest in renewable. As guys, is clear that the renewable need long time stability, because if you look at all the investment done worldwide, the lifetime of the renewable asset, wind or solar, on CSP and whatever, has something in the range of 30-35 years of useful life. That means that you should be in condition not only to build that, but to maintain and to drive the car for the next 20-25 years, because it's quite normal that this kind of infrastructure has a payback period which is not 2-3 years. The payback period for the investor is something which is in the region of 10 years. And if you have a wind farm, if you have a PV farm or CSP, which has 20-25 of useful lifetime, is it clear that also the financing should be provided on the same level of tenor from the lifetime of the wind farm. All the renewable, not only in Europe but worldwide, are financed through long-term financing which are longer than 10, 15, in some cases also 20 years. As the technology is mature, it's not difficult to evaluate the maturity of the technology, and all these contracts and the energy that you produce are paid from an off-taker, that in some cases are a corporate off-taker and trader and state-owned companies, but also the contract outline of this transaction are a long-term transaction. So it's very important for a bank who invests in this kind of sector, take in consideration a long period, at least 15, 20 years. So it's clear that, in particular in the emerging market, 20 years is quite a long period. as there should be happen a lot of things in the meantime. But it's important that you understand which are the fundamental of the asset, that you produce energy in a country that need this kind of energy, like renewable energy. In particular, if you look at this slide, I want to point out which are the main risks which affect this kind of investment. But I don't want to go through to the legal and operational cost, construction cost, but I want to focus much more on risk affecting the revenues, the risk affecting the financial structuring of this asset. As anytime you finance a PV plant on a wind farm, a renewable asset, you have to consider that the capex, in most of case, the capex is calculated based on the value of the tariff. And looking at how does the tariff, the feed-in tariff of the price of the PPA, the strike price on the PPA is moving, it's clear that technology that built a wind farm, a PV farm in Libya has the same price, more or less, as the wind farm that you built in Italy and Spain and in Europe. So also the price of energy should be considered and take into account that the cost of this asset is the same in each country where you build something. The difference is that the perspective on the risk, the country risk, as the country risk give you the upside, the price, the premium that you request, that investor request to invest in a country where you are not the same perception of risk that you should have in not an emerging market like in Europe or in any other country. Is it important that because anytime you work with this transaction, you build a long-term business plan. And in the long-term business plan that you use to finance this asset, you have to be sure that the amount of revenue and the cost and also all the things that you put in your business plan should be stable for at least 20 years. Next slide, please. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, in São Paulo, we have a relationship with to invest in this country. We have two different approach with two different banks. No? We are approached with the DFI ACA, as the DFI, like I don't know, IFC, EIB, any other DFI are very compelling on the renewable market in Africa. But as I say at the beginning of my speech, they have a risk attitude which is quite different from a commercial bank, because this kind of institution has the capability to discuss directly with institution on the high level and to manage and to keep them understand which is the right solution to any problem. This is something which in a commercial bank, an international bank, doesn't have, like the DFI and the World Bank and the IFC. So it's very important also for us, in particular in the country, in the emerging country, when you start to work in this country, to have a big, to have the partnership with this kind of institution. And the second is also to have the partnership with local banks, as the local banks, in most of the case, are the banks who connect the payment of the bills, which is the way in which you have to repay back an investment in energy, generally speaking. So it's very important also to have create contact and to create relationship with the local bank, which are in condition to raise local money, which are in condition sometimes also to have the convertibility between the local currency and the Europe or US, and it depends on the currency that you use to finance. So also the institution, the bank, has to create a partnership among the state-owned company, state-owned bank, DFI, and all the other ECA who provide a credit enhancement like MIGA, like SACE, like, I don't know, African Export-Import Bank, this kind of bank who have to provide funding. The banks are on the same level of the DFI, but provide money only if this DFI are involved, also because for us represent a way to straighten our position and to reduce the risk as we are part of the transaction with this bank. And the third, also to involve the local bank, because the local bank is the bank who help you day by day activity to the sponsor, also because if you have to manage to make the operational of plant, you need to have a local content on it, you have to pay the wage of the local people there. So it's very important to create a system among the DFI, commercial bank and local bank. As the risk, the principal risk, that the financial principal risk that we can see in this kind of transaction, one is the capital transfer risk. As in some case, in any country, there is the risk that is not possible to get money outside from the countries. If something happen, typically is a change in law that should be happen, we have this big kind of risk. And so we also to understand how to cover this risk of capital transfer risk. The second is convertibility risk, which is very important risk. When you have to invest in emerging country, you have to understand how is the balance of payment with the foreign client, because much more dollar and US you are in condition to attract from outside, for example, from import-export, from any other kind of activity that you have outside, and much more easy also have to invest in this, to have money to invest in this kind of asset. As consider that we have a PV farm, so a PV farm produces energy. We have a PPA agreement with the state-owned company, which provide to you a fixed payment for 20 years after a tender with a lot of international investors. At the end of the day, you provide the wind farm produce energy, the state-owned company at the energy, and he has to collect money from the final user to pay back the energy that they had to pay from the solar park. In this moment, there should be a mismatch between the currency that the state-owned electricity company will gain, which are denominated in local currency, and the currency in which the money is provided, as the financing is provided in most cases in Europe or in US, also because most of the manufacturers, which are the wind turbine, the module turbine, the inverter turbine, are European or US, so they need to be paid in the US or in US dollar or in euro. So it's clear that also the financing that are the money that investors need to pay the asset should be paid in strong currency. And in that sense, there is also a risk of convertibility, which in some cases should be quite high. It depends how many dollar or US the region, the country is conditioned to attract due to the activity that they have abroad. The third is operational and infrastructure risk.
Mr.
Yes?
Could we conclude to keep track of time and give time
Absolutely.
for
Q&A?
Yes.
Okay, so okay, so the last is the operational and infrastructure risk. This kind of risk is a risk that I told you before is driven the fact that you have to manage this asset for at least 20-25 years. And the last is political reach and breach of contract. Now I want to spend really 1-2 minutes about the importance of the PPA, power purchase agreement, and which are the pillar for a power purchase agreement among a private investor which have to build and operate a PV farm and a state-owned energy company who has to provide a long-term fixed payment for 20 years. In this case, it's very important that this kind of PPA will be agreed not only with the regulator, fundamental, but also with the banks, as the banks need to enforce or need to be clear that any kind of problem that should be happen in this transaction for a long-term payment, we are in condition to step in the right of the investor and try to negotiate with the public authority, which is the way to solve the problem in case there is no payment. The second is the possibility to cover the payment through a credit enhancement provided, for example, from MIGA, from any other ECA. And the third is really to sign a direct agreement, which is a multi-contract among the producer, the private investor, all the banks, and the buyer, which is the final off-taker. Through the presence of these three things, I think that the PPA contract should be considered bankable. Is it clear that is a long shot activity to do? as the regulatory steps is the first step that you need before investing in that country. But looking at also the speech of Mr. Ansari, it is clear that there are a lot of potential opportunity in Libya, as there are a lot of viability of sun, a lot of viability of wind, and also the grid connection is well done through the part where you have the city. So it's not different. It should be not so difficult to bring energy from outside, where we have much more availability of sun and wind, to the coast of the Libya, when there are much more possibility to use energy and to make the energy reliable. So, well, I leave to a Q&A session. Any question about that? By now, so far, I stop my presentation, guys, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stefanoni, where the presentation was primarily about risk and how to de-risk these risks and the importance of availability of a strong counterpart like banks, which is very much important, and importance of bankability of the contracts and guarantees also, specifically in case of the taker has not enough credit, maybe government guarantee might be needed, or might be like Mr. Stefanoni mentioned, mega or whatever, but for sure paving the ground. Actually, no bank would like to resort to guarantees. He would like to have everything going smooth. So working on the risking is most importantly point. I think there is a lot of very important question when it comes, so I encourage more questions. I see not much question in the box. Please ask your questions. A very good opportunity. You have very distinguished panelists, and I think it's a very good to seize this opportunity to ask questions. Last but not least, for sure, is our presentation on integration of variable renewable energy on power system challenges and solution, which is a point raised at the beginning by Mr. Rigotti regarding grid and renewable system integration. The presentation will be provided by Andrea Prodinisi. Mr. Prodinisi has a degree in electrical engineering as well as a master degree both in electrical engineering with a specialization in energy sector at large. In 2009, he got his master degree. He acquired mainly experience in field of planning and secure operation of electrical systems. He has extensive project experience in the integration of new generation renewable and non-renewable in a large power system in several countries. Actually, I counted the country. I could list all the lists. 16 countries extend over 5 continents. So it's a very deep experience in the field. He has been involved in the development of methodologies to assess the impact of high share of wind generation in electric power systems for International Energy Agency for wind task 25. Furthermore, he has been involved in several consultancy studies for the Italian transmission system operation Terna, including adequacy, reliability analysis of electrical generation and transmission system. Also, he is involved through Terna in a pan-European monitoring for adequacy of the power system resource of the NTSO, which is Transmission System Operator of Europe for electricity. The floor is yours, Mr. Prodinisi.
Thank you very much, Dr. El Salmawi, for your introduction. Okay. Today, I would like to talk about the main challenges, technical challenges and solutions for the integration of variable renewable energy on power system. Next slide, please. The integration of a large amount of variable renewable energy sources introduces several challenges, technical challenges that have to be managed to assure the security of supply. We have a system-wide impact like overgeneration risk, additional reserve, needs for frequency regulations, but also network impacts with network congestions, impact on voltage profile of this kind of sources, and also on the system protections. Impacts on the market in terms of risk of the market price distortion, or the impact of the ancillary service market, but also regulatory issue, as mentioned before by the previous panelist, and environmental issue. The integration of variable renewable energy needs for combined actions to minimize the possible generation curtailments, maintaining the system security. Next slide, please. The risk of overgeneration is an important issue that has to be investigated and managed to assure the maximum penetration of variable renewable energy in the power systems. The risk of overgeneration arises mainly during low loading conditions, when the load is low and the flexibility of power system could be not able to balance the system, avoiding generation curtailments. The overgenerations risk impacts directly on the energy markets, affecting the behavior of the system operator. So there could be market price distortion due to the priority of renewable generation in the dispatching in the system. Next slide, please. Flexibility. The flexibility can help to address the grid integration challenges. It's very important, it's crucial for maximize the integration of variable renewable energy in the system, in particular when high share of this kind of renewable sources are included in the power system. So new paradigms for storage facility can be used, not only hydro pumping, but also utility scale batteries or clusters of electrical vehicle, but also not conventional devices like CAES and cryogenic energy storage. So the flexibility is very important, because the system with the new features introduced by wind and solar generation power plants introduce steep ramps during the morning and also during the evening that have to be managed by the system operator, and in order to avoid generation curtailments. Next slide, please. Network congestions are others important issues, and often the sites with the best wind and solar potential are concentrated in limited areas of a country, and the exploitation of these sources in the best locations could create network congestion. This is the example, is an example experienced in Italy, where the best potential for wind and solar power production is in the south of the country, and the greater demand center in the north. At the beginning of the experience of the integration in Italy of wind and also solar generation, Italy experienced large generation curtailments due to the big increase of the installed capacity in a very few years, 1-2 years. Then the system operator and also the regulator put in place the measures needed to limitate the network congestions and also the power plants curtailments. Next slide, please. How to address the risk of overgeneration and network congestion in power system? We recommend a probabilistic approach, analyzing the impact of wind and solar sources over a whole year, not only on single snapshots. And it is important, this approach, in order to evaluate the risk of not meeting instantaneous demand, the risk of energy not supplied, and also quantify the renewable generation curtailments due to network overloads, because the risk of variable generation curtailments is strongly nonlinear if not measures are undertaken when increasing this kind of sources capacity. So it's important that the system operator put in place the measures for enhance the variable renewable penetrations in the power system. Next slide, please. Reliability analysis and all are very useful for to evaluate the risk of renewable curtailments, and probabilistic simulations are able to cover to analyze all expected conditions of the system operations during a whole year. In CESI, we used grid reliability and adequacy risk evaluator, that is a computational tool developed by CESI on behalf of Terna, the Italian TSO, and it is a very useful tool based on Monte Carlo probability method that is able to simulate many possible configurations of the system, considering the unavailability rates of generations, lines, and also transformers. So taking into account the operation of the power system, not only in terms of generation, but also in terms of the transmission grid. The tool simulate the actions of the system operator in order to dispatch the sources, the generation sources, and consider the main features of wind and solar generation, so the intermittency of these sources, possible forecast errors. So in this way, the probabilistic approach allowed to simulate as better as possible the behavior of the system in presence of wind and solar sources. Next, please. This is the computational process of GRARE, the Grid Reliability and Adequacy Risk Evaluator, that consider the optimization of the maintenance, the hydro optimizations, the random drawing of the photovoltaic and the wind productions, and the system operator. So operations, so the weekly unit commitment, the optimal hourly dispatching of the sources, and also the redispatching considering the network, the transmission network infrastructures. Next, please. Okay, an important challenge for the variable renewable energy integration is the sizing of the additional reserve and the balancing capability. So wind and solar production futures impacts on the variability and uncertainty of the power generation. So there is a need for additional reserve to cope with the variability and uncertainty of this kind of sources. So historically, the operating reserve was based on a specific criteria, like, for example, the imbalances following the largest generation contingency, for example. So now, introducing wind and solar in the power system, large share of these sources in the system, the standard rules must be accompanied by innovative approach and methodologies to increase the system security, considering both the variability and uncertainty introduced by variable renewable energy. With this kind of renewable sources, is important both the upward and the downward reserve, not only the upward reserve as in the traditional power system. Next slide, please. The impact on power system balancing involves different time scales. So the uncertainty is unexpected change in power system variables due to the forecast error and short-term phenomena, while the variability is unexpected change in power system variables due to, for example, seasonal variability or diurnal pattern due to the daily weather and the day-night changes. So uncertainty and short-term variability affect the balancing markets and the short-term operating reserve, while the variability affect the day ahead and also the intraday markets and also the unit commitment and the dispatch of the sources. So in the definition of the operating reserve, is important the time step chosen for the dispatch and market operation, because it influences the reserve requirements. So more frequent decisions reduce the uncertainty in the power system and help the system operator. Next slide, please. Okay, new practice for the assessment and allocation of the reserve requirements are recommended. The operating reserve should be calculated for appropriate time scale, matching also the existing operational practice. But it's important to highlight that static allocation methods for committing reserve are not recommended, but since the maximum forecast error, so the maximum imbalances, depends on the variable renewable production, a dynamic sizing approach for committing reserve is suggested to reduce the reserve levels, avoiding over estimations, improve unit commitment, and reduce redispatching cost. So next slide, please. Looking at the evolutions towards fully renewable power systems, a mix of solutions shall be put in place to ensure the reliability and the security of the system. The investments in transmission networks are very important. So interconnections, but also VAR compensation equipment in order to manage the voltage profile in the system, synchronous compensator in order to assure enough inertia, in the power system to manage the operation of the power system. Then there are also some market integrations actions that can be put in place in order to maximize the integration of variable renewable energy in the power system. So, for example, cross-border ancillary markets or capacity markets or participation of new resources like electrical vehicle, for example, but also the market, the energy market, have to evolve towards a new scheme in order to maximize the integration of these sources. Next slide, please.
Could we conclude, Yani, soon? Because to
yes.
leave some time for Q&A. Yeah.
Yes, okay. Only a few words on flexibility. Flexibility is crucial to integrate a large amount of renewables generation in the power system. There are several options available to increase flexibility in the power systems. For example, new hydropower plants, but also utility scale batteries or non-conventional solutions. The chart show the frequently used options to increase flexibility and the cost. It's important to highlight that the flexibility reflects not just physical systems, but also institutional frameworks. So the cost of flexibility options varies, but institutional changes may be among the least expensive. Okay, next slide, please. Finally, there are other important measures in terms of transmission system operator and distribution system operator integration and digitalizations, and also grid code review is important to maximize the integration of this new energy source in the power system. Next slide, please. Okay, finally, I would like to share with you the CESI experiences and the integration of renewable power system, variable renewable energy in the power system. We work recently for different projects with the RES4Africa Foundations, and also in the past, for example, in Libya, CESI was near Libya since the beginning of the era of the renewable energy integrations. With a wind integration study performed when was instituted the Renewable Energy Authority of Libya. So this is only an overview of our experiences. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much for the very informative presentation. Actually, the presentation was also on the same track regarding risk, but this time it's a technical risk, and basically it's talk about very important topics. Actually, we in Egypt, we are challenged as the stretch shows that high share of renewable energy is being expected, inertia studies being very much needed, reserve, as it has been pointed out, cross-border ancillary, capacity markets, many features need to be tackled in order to ensure system as share of renewable energy. Also, electric mobility in future will play a great role, specifically what they call it V2G, vehicle to grid, and its impact, and how much we could benefit from the storage capacity which might come, although it might be stochastic, how much we could benefit from this storage capacity. I must switch to Q&A. I appreciate if our panelists restrict their answer to the minimum time, such that we can take as maximum as possible of the questions. My first question for Ms. Jasmine, which is received regarding, you identified some of the challenges. away from the political risk, there is another risk you identified, but also you identified that there is a need for a pilot project, an IPP project. What could be structure of a project of this type in absence or still a regulatory framework or other kind of challenges being under development? What could be the feature of this work? What kind of guarantees being needed for this work? What could be the structure of it?
Thank you, Hafiz, and thank you for all the colleagues for the nice presentations. Yeah, so I put the pilot project as the third bullet point in my list, where I said first there needs to be a consensus creation around opening the market, and then we would need to see a regulatory framework, and then it makes sense to implement a pilot project. So there is a sequence to implementing a pilot project, in the sense that a pilot would serve to test, so to say, the laws that would have been put in place. And then after that test, there would be a scope to maybe go and review and revise some of the regulation in case that there are issues with the implementation. And so you're right to ask that question. There would have to be a careful sequencing of it, and implementing a pilot project without putting in place any meaningful regulatory and policy opening, it would not yield that result that we need, right? So the pilot would only be a pilot if it can be replicated. And otherwise, it doesn't add that much value except for that small amount of megawatts that maybe it would add.
Okay. We have a question to Dr. Ansari about what about the short term? Sure, the government might be going as considering the current shortage in the system, might go for a fast track plan. Is renewable energy a part of this fast track plan? And what is the status of renewable energy on the short term? Is that focus on regulations and develop methodologies, or there is a plan for developing some kind of public projects maybe?
Thank you, Hafiz, for your question. In fact, the plan is the promotion that can be given to the renewable. The renewable can be competitor to other fast track conventional generation, because of the dramatic shrinking of the renewable technologies. And also, if we see in the long run, the operational cost of the renewable energy would be competitive regarding the compared with the conventional power plant. Yes, indeed, we should have a regulatory framework and electricity law and electricity renewable, also renewable energy law, in order to be able to have attractive markets for the renewable energy. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Hafiz.
There is another question about what about distributed renewable energy system? Is that part of the plan to start with, which is might not need that substantial kind of, or it's much less risky? Is there a plan for it?
Yes, in fact, now for this, at least for the short-term plan, we should have a sort of distributed generation in our network in order to support our network technically, and to have these renewable energy sources at the center of the load as much as we can.
Okay. I switched to Mr. Hassan. There is a question about what could MIDREG provide support to Libya in developing its regulatory framework? What kind of support MIDREG could offer?
Absolutely, Dr. Hafiz, is a very good question. So MIDREG, as we have been supporting all our members, we can also give and contribute to our Libyan colleagues. in a way that while they were trying to establish their independent regulators, we can provide technical and non-technical or regulatory support to their endeavors, as we have already done for our Lebanon and Tunisian colleagues. So this is one thing. We can also provide our contribution in developing a kind of regulatory framework for Libya. We can also provide any kind of need or contribution that they are expecting from us. We can also be ready to do so this. But first and foremost, I would humbly recommend them to establish these independent regulators. In second stage, developing a transparent, non-discriminatory regulatory framework is much easier. So even for establishing these independent regulators, we have some benchmarks. We have our experience coming from all our, let's say, the members, including the European Union ones, Balkans and Turkey. We will be ready to share our experience in those countries, how they have established their regulators, which kind of difficulties, barriers they have faced, and how they solved them. So we have all this expertise. So we would be ready to support them in establishing their independent regulators and also developing their legal framework in opening the market to competition. This could be through study visit, this could be through tailor-made reports, this could be through workshops, this could be through specific expertise, any kind of.
Okay, very good. Is there a possibility to form like a peer review for startup of a regulator, so you could identify what could be steps need to be taken?
Exactly, as we have been still doing for Lebanon. Lebanon requested our let's say the help and support in establishing their independent regulators. So in these, let's say, the last 6 months periods, we have been oftenly, let's say, contacted with them in different things in establishing their independent regulators. So we are even assessing their existing law, which foresees to create an independent regulators. Even we can help in drafting a law in establishing an independent regulator. Of course, we can do it. We have this expertise.
Okay, I have a question.
Ask, Dr. Abdul Salam to contact me or MEDREC Secretariat anytime to identify their needs and requirements. Then we can really develop a very good roadmap for them.
Okay, so we have a generous offer from MEDREC. I believe that our Libyan counterpart will take it very seriously. A question to Mr. Stefanoni regarding what kind of guarantee could be needed, and if we talk about a pilot project at the beginning as pickup for the program and getting learn and building experience, how could be structure of this, and what the prospects of a private bank, as you mentioned, which is more challenging compared to development FEIs?
Well, first of all, I said in my suggestion is that you have to leave to the private market to compete. So what I see generally is that the state-owned energy company organize a tender, a private tender, not a public tender, to other investors that want to build, operate an infrastructure renewable asset. In most of these cases, what I see is that what the state-owned company put on the tender is a strike price on the price of the energy for a long-term period. Then the way you organize, when is organized a tender and a private has decided to bid it, that at the end of the day you have a final bidder. Now, which kind of guarantee you can require in this kind of situation? So in a situation where my private client has participated to a tender, the tender was awarded by the state-owned energy company with a 25-year PPA, which has all the all the security that on the clauses that are foreseen for this kind of transaction. Then we will be involved. So sometimes we involve MIGA or any other credit enhancement institution which provide a breach of contract, more or less, where the MIGA in this case give us the mitigant in case of non-payment of the obligation by the state-owned energy company. As I told you, we have 20 years of contract in place, so MIGA guarantee gives to the bank the guarantee that in case of not payment of the energy from the state-owned energy company, what doesn't happen is that the MIGA enter in the contract and she provided a liquidity facility to the bank the day which the banks and the producer, the banks and the off-taker try to find a solution how to start in again the payment of the loan. In terms of guarantee request for a project finance transaction, you have full packaging. The packaging is the pledge over the share of the seller of the energy, the assignment of all the receivable arising for the project contract, which is the EPC contract, the O&M contract, the PPA contract. Then there are also the mortgage on the land, on the right of surface, on that land when you build the asset. And then there are also all the big insurance packagings which are assignment to the banks. What does it mean? It means that even this transaction, in most of the case, we finance with a gearing ratio, with a leverage of, I don't know, 70-30, 80-20, and the banks provide a percentage among 70 or 80% of the total amount of the investment. Is it clear that the banks need to have the full security package provided by the producer? So a part of the standard security package request for project finance, in most of this transaction, we have also the activity of MIGA or any other credit enhancement who provide a breach of contract guarantee to cover the no payment obligation from the state-owned energy company.
And a very short question. We receive questions that we have a model like Mazen in Morocco, where the public is a joint venture partner, or another model where like a PPA for where the public is just the off-taker. What do you think the best track for Libya to go?
I do appreciate what is doing Mazen in Morocco, because they create JV between private and Mazen carries on all the renewable energy activity, and also in a transaction that I'm looking at with them, with one private client, they also provide a PPA agreement with the producer. It's clear that the PPA, the Mazen doesn't buy directly the energy, but is in the middle between the producer and the off-taker. So you have a back-to-back contract with them. So it's very useful because we have a single entity who manage all the renewable energy concern in the region. So it can help also to concentrate all the activity Q&A on the structure in the same entity, which has also the capability to do. I suggest honestly to create a private partnership among private and public. So it can help you also to have the public on the same boat on the U, but on the same day who risk the money, who have to take the procurement, and who is in condition to do that is a private, which has experience to do that. But the model that applied in Morocco is, I do appreciate that. I think that it works. In fact, Morocco is one of the regions in the North Africa which has much more renewable energy asset in place, and they have a huge program also on wind, solar, CSP. So really, I think that this kind of formula should be work very well.
Okay, as we exceeded our time, my final question could be to Mr. Prodinisi about the transmission network, how the role of the transmission network in maximizing the integration of renewable energy sources. What's its role? Mr. Prodinisi? I appreciate Mr. Prodinisi is online.
Prudenzi. No.
Okay, please go ahead.
I think it's blocked or what?
So we might lost contact.
Yeah, could be.
Yes. Okay. Unfortunately, we couldn't have this response to the question, but I think the presentations, we have a question to the organizers regarding the records of the webinar. Is that going to be available to participants?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Hello, can you repeat the question?
Yes, the question about the role of the transmission system in increasing share of renewable energy to the grid. What's its role?
The role of the transmission network.
Yes.
Okay. The transmission grid always plays a key role for the system stability and the security of supply. Even more so in power system with high level of variable energy penetration. So a modernization of the transmission grid is required to meet the new challenges introduced by variable renewable energy, by making the grid more flexible, reliable, and open to all exchanges, no matter where the supplier and consumer of energy are located. So the modernization of the grid requires the increase of power quality, system stability, and transfer capacity of the transmission. So new approaches to power system operation and control have to be deployed to meet the efficient and reliable operation. So the network infrastructure must become more smarter and helping mitigation of variability of renewable energy sources. So the exploitation of the network and the network interconnections among countries plays an important role in large-scale integration of variable renewable energy. So the integration of the markets and an effective cooperation among the country lead to the maximization of variable renewable energy penetration and the best use of the sources, not only on a national basis, but at regional level. So this is very, very important. Interconnections improve the flexibility of the systems to cope with the variability and uncertainty, maintaining security of supply, avoiding overgenerations phenomena, and improving system resilience in case of extreme events. So this is the message in terms of the transmission network.
Smarter grids could help also, specifically if we talk also on distribution system and distributed solar systems. Yeah.
The distribution network is important. The cooperation of distribution system operator and transmission system operator is important to help the integration of in particular photovoltaic sources at distribution level. So also the modernizations and the suitable measures on distribution system have to be put in place for the integration of these sources.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to thank all of you for very informative presentation, and I switch to Roberto with the final question about availability of the records of the webinar. Its floor is yours, Roberto. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I think Ilaria, as usual, will send you the link with all the presentation and also the registration if you need it. Let me say my satisfaction for the quality and the quantity also the information my speaker gave. Being this one the first webinar we dedicated to Libya, and thanks to the support and stubbornness of Mr. Abdul Salam, we're really proud that this first seminar was dense. Thank you also to the speaker, of course, for the passion. But I want to tell you to GECOL that we are progressing in RES4Africa and RES4Med with several webinars, several plans, several studies. So please be in touch with Ilaria and get a regular newsletter update so that you can disseminate to your colleague, to your ministry, to your regulatory, to your investor. They can easily and free of charge, as you know very well, apply to this webinar on digitalization, on grid for Africa, on the risk investment, on policy and regulatory issue. So we have so much ongoing that I'm sure Libya can, the Libyan colleague that you will decide will be there. Our foundation, RES4Med and RES4Africa, of course, it's a non-profit, and we collect the best, the creme de la creme of the European and international now, like UNECA, African Union, IEA, IRENA, international network to provide a success story or even a mistake done, not only in Europe, but our company, I want to remind you, invests in 27 countries. So they can collect what's happening in Mexico or in Brazil or in Thailand or in Australia. So the story is easy for you. You can then decide in Libya what you want to do. We don't want to push. We're not a lobbyist. We want to provide you, today was a demonstration, food for thoughts, and we are available to support the Libyan decision maker in whatever they want to do. But I know it's a very good moment now. We hope that the Libya people and the Libya structure can really make the step change toward the new transition for the green. So Ilaria, do you want to reassure the speaker and also, of course, Mr. Professor Affet, thank you so much, Affet, about the fact that they will receive soon some kind of proceedings or what? Please, Ilaria.
Yes, thank you, Roberto. The webinar has been recorded, so you will find all the video in the RES4Africa website. I will send you also all the presentation of today. I think that will be very interesting all the day, and the interaction from the audience. So thank you very much also, Afes, for your moderation, for having moderated this event, and I thank again also GECOL for the jointly coordination of this event.
And of course, with the permission of the speaker, you can download those presentations in PDF and feel free to distribute them around, because our policy is that the more people know what we all together do, the better for everybody. There's no protection. Innovation is not research. Research is patented. Research may request a lot of money and therefore must be remunerated. Innovation is a very quick, and we want to make innovation also for Libya a pushing force for the future. So with this one, I thank you all of you. A little bit late, but it was really exciting to have this closed door meeting with the people of such a level. So Ilaria, once again, a good start, and hopefully Libya will be in our radar screen more than we thought. We can conclude finally from Morocco to Jordan. We had the Libya blank, and now we have Libya in color. Thank you so much, particularly to the Deputy Director of GECOL, which was our student, and I see it pays to have this direct approach and friendly approach. Thank you, Professor Stefanoni. Thank you, of course, Prudenzi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Hassan, and see you soon. And we will plan something. But in the meantime, Abu Salam, take a look at our website, take a look at the Ilaria newsletter, and you apply for several webinars where you can really see digitalization, infrastructure, missing link policy, job creation. All these things are important for you. For instance, we are going to South Africa. Imagine in South Africa, 245,000 people working in the coal. How are we going to make a transition to clean energy if we don't reskill them? The same is for Libya, which is mostly petrol and gas. So you can learn a lesson through us from other countries and other situations. Arrivederci. Arrivederci.
Bye,
Thank you.
bye.
Bye.
Pleasure.
Bye,
Ciao,
everyone.
arrivederci. Arrivederci.
Bye bye.
Right.